My name is Steven.
I'm Scarlet.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Sure.
Um,
Your
okay.
your
Oh,
identity.
okay. I mean, like, not to like make a long story about this, but I feel like people's labels change over time, and like, but right now I feel like I most closely identify with the labels of bisexual, and I mean, like, do you want to talk about like gender too?
Yep. Go ahead.
Um, I mean, like gender, like it's a more like long and complicated than like just like summing it all up in one word. And I mean, eventually, like at the end of the day, politically, I don't necessarily agree with like labeling identities being politically necessary for like the rest of like his or like the rest of time or like humanity's time on Earth. But most closely, I identify with the term agender now, meaning that like I don't identify with male or female, and I mean like if I like but I mean they're more like things that are like feminine that like I am drawn to.
Mm-hmm. What about
So
you?
to follow that up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm biromantic asexual, and I am a cis girl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought you were a woman.
Yes. So how did that affect your how does that affect your life and growing up?
And do you mean like just like generally or like
Anything really.
asexuality wise? Like what are
Um
you more interested in?
anything really that and embodies you.
Um,
So like more so agender that you identify now.
oh, well, honestly, like I didn't even like explore sort of that part of myself until I was what 20, 21, like 22-ish.
Uh-huh.
Before that, I was like like a pretty like standard liberal, like, oh yeah, transgender people deserve to have like the same human rights as everyone else. And my like political ideas about transgender people or like queer people were not that well developed or like that well defined or in depth because I was like, yeah, like I identify as bisexual, but like that's about it. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I had done the like necessary research into like those sort of identities and that history that I didn't need to like further look into that sort of thing. But I was dating this person at this time when I was 21, 22-ish. I think I just turned 22. And they didn't identify as cisgender. They identified as bigender. And they were like sometimes agender and then sometimes like a mess of like different genders and like I saw sort of how liberating that was and I was like, okay, well, like maybe I'm not cisgender because there are definitely like things from my childhood that I remember like not fitting in with what I was supposed to be or like what was being pushed upon me, and there always being a disconnect between like me and other like males. I remember particularly when I was younger, there would just be like things that like other kids were interested in, and then not that like I'm saying like, oh, like other boys were interested in like football and I was like interested in like feminine things, but I mean there was just um, it was just like a different type of feeling, and like there was a disconnect there between like what they would be interested in and the sort of things that I would be interested in, and I think that like wasn't really explored until my adult life because I had always felt like a disconnect, like because of my racial identities or because of my sexuality, that I was always sort of an outsider. So I didn't really need to explore like that gender part of me. But being with that person really made me like consider like, oh, do I really identify with the term cisgender? And after a lot of like self-exploration and thinking about it on my own, I realized that I didn't identify with that term, and I didn't really want to subscribe to like these gender politics of like man as the aggressor or like woman as the victim. So I was like, nope. No, I'm getting something. And that's like basically how I figured it out.
What about you?
For me, asexuality and being bi, it was long and complicated. I knew it was ace a long time before I knew it was bi, but I didn't attach the label to it until like a year after Adidas bought it. Because well, I knew from like a young age, even though like it's completely reasonable.
So lock this one too.
I know. Go ahead.
It's completely reasonable for like middle schoolers and like high schoolers to not be interested in sex, but like I felt still like a disconnect from like the average like child's experience of not being old enough to be interested in sex. It just like my peers were all very like sexual in the way that like I'd say like in an immature way. Like in the ways that kids are. I never was, and it was just weird. I thought I was just sheltered for a long time, but I mean, just like the more and more time that went on, I was like, oh, middle school, I'm not really interested in sex. Well, that's normal for a middle schooler. But then in high school, I still wasn't interested in sex, and I mean, normal for a high schooler. Late high school, still not interested in sex. Okay, I mean, I guess it's probably reasonable. College, still not there. So it was
Bane of my existence.
Interesting.
it was just a slow burn kind of thing. Like, okay, this wasn't ever going to change. Even though I had hoped for so long that it would change and I would finally grow up and be normal. But now it's just like I'm totally chill with this. Like it's kind of weird and irrational, but like I feel so much more relaxed about sex now than what I thought I was gonna be into sex. And like it's way more better and more open than it felt back then.
Okay. Interesting. So you guys are part of the spectrum. So how's that and did it empower you and like embrace that who you are in a group that, you're more familiar with? How did that affect you?
Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead, anyone.
Okay. So, up until like the point of me coming to UNLV, I had always felt that there was an internal conflict between like what part of like my marginalized identity I was going to prioritize, and it was always like, do I prioritize my like racial minority status more, or do I prioritize like my sexuality status as a minority more? And I think like up until I came to UNLV, it was like always I'm prioritizing my racial minority status. So like I would join like clubs around like my heritage as a Mexican American and like my status or like my identity as a person of color. So I was like more passionate and involved in like those sorts of issues, and then like things related to like being a queer person were like put on the back burner. I was involved in like queer things like theater, like performing and stuff like that, but I felt like that was like a sufficient like way of balancing out like the different parts of it. And it wasn't until the summer before I came to UNLV that I really like was considering things in my life and considering like how previously I had divided things in my life, and I decided to myself, like there doesn't need to be a disconnect there. There doesn't need to be like a prioritizing of one thing about myself over the other thing. Like I exist as a whole person, and any organization that I go into should accept me as a whole person. And I shouldn't necessarily have to like fight to be accepted as a whole person, and like I shouldn't have to like put one thing on the back burner, put one thing on hold to participate in certain things like related to like my other status as a minority. So when I came to Spectrum, I came here with the intention of, like doing like politically active things, and like not compromising my identity as a Mexican American person, a person of color, and a queer person. And if this space didn't accept me for like all of who I was, I would make it accept me for all of who I was, or like get it to accept me for all of who I was. and I think there's like maybe like some very like minor instances where some people in spectrum have said like very, or at the very least slightly racially tone deaf things, and I'm just like, ugh. But I mean, for the most part, spectrum has been like pretty like A+ for like dealing like racial sensitivity, and I mean, even though like politically I don't necessarily agree with like all members of spectrum all the time or like about everything, because I do honestly feel like I'm further to the left of most spectrum members. It's not at a point like where it truly bothers me, or I'm gonna get into fights with people about this, because at the end of the day, I mean, it eventually like is like a serious thing that we have like, these sort of like deep set disagreements with each other. But I mean, right now, like coming to spectrum, like it's fine that it's not like so much political action motivated around the things that we disagree about, and I knew that spectrum was going to be like a pretty like typical Democrat sort of like liberal place. I mean, Spectrum is a nonprofit organization, so like we don't endorse political candidates or do things like that. But we do like mobilize for political causes and support political causes that we care about. But it's like a nonpartisan thing. What else was I going to say? Oh, so and I think Spectrum has done a good job of like accepting me as a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
Joining Spectrum, I was kind of nervous about it at first because I was worried they'd be like more closer to the center. But then when I like the center as in like the political spectrum, not like a place. But it was actually a really good experience when I came. I was really shy at first, but it was really nice having a community. But it wasn't super new for me because I was one of those like over-invested straight allies before I actually knew that I was LGBT.
You're all for it.
Part of the LGBT community, I mean. Well, yeah, so I'd had a lot of gay friends, and like most of my social group was part of the community, even way before I joined. But it was nice, like having it like be an overt thing. Like before, my friends just turned out to be queer, but like going to a decidedly queer space, like making that decision, going out there was very exciting, and it was very interesting to see like there's just so many people and like intersections of different marginalizations in spectrum that like of course it's like a learning experience and like it betters everyone, and it was nice like hearing people who knew what the fuck they were talking about. So it's been cool, it's been great. I actually met Steven through Spectrum. We argued. Also I've noticed Spectrum has gotten a lot better about asexuality, especially with like consent, with like the topics of discussion and activities that Spectrum does. Not saying that Spectrum does like group sexual activities or anything, but like they talk about like sexual activities. And before it was just like one of my first meetings, they had like a group of cards that was like, it was kind of like Never Have You Ever, but like in a card game, and like 99% of the deck was really sexual. So I feel like just like after seeing me come in and be like super uncomfortable with like everything they did, and like opening up like discussions to like really sexual things without asking the room for consent first, they've gotten a lot better about that, a lot better at doing stuff about that. So that's really good. That's really exciting.
So that brings us to my last point, actually. More likely, what would you, if you were to meet yourself and really, if you mean yourself like you're 10, say, for instance, you mean your past self, what would you tell yourself now? Or what's your future goals?
Like 10 years ago me or like
10
year
years
old me?
or 10 years ago.
I'd be 13.
Mhm.
Whoa. That was like a real bad time in my life.
Mm.
I mean, honestly, like it's so cliche to say this, but shit gets better.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like you're gonna go through a lot of emotional trauma, like a lot of emotional pain. Like you, you think you're in the thick of it now. Just wait one more year. Yeah, I mean, like shit's hard. The world is hard, but I mean, staying like that positive force and like not losing sight of like that goodness or like that sweetness and positivity in you is going to be so important to shedding that light and like sharing that with other people. I mean, there like I would tell myself like there were so many unnecessary conflicts that I fought with myself over like things that didn't matter, and I mean, it's just so unnecessary now. Like, all of you is good enough. All of you is valuable enough. All of you is okay enough. And you should work, and you have to work hard on not forgetting that. Even now, I think I've come a long way in like self acceptance and all that. But it's like a more constant reminder, or a reminder that I have grown. It's grown easier to remember that about myself, that I am good enough, I am okay enough, I am valuable enough, and it's just hard to remember that when you're younger. And there's so many things that are like trying to tear you down, or like there's so many things out of your control, especially as somebody who's so young, like as a 13-year-old, that are out of your control, and you're just like trying to make the best out of a bad situation. And I mean, things are not your fault, and even though shit happens to you, it eventually makes you a stronger person. And I know that's not like you still didn't deserve that shit to happen to you, but it does make you a stronger person, and it makes you a kinder and more gentler person. And I mean, at the end of the day, I wish that shit would not have happened to me, but I'm not glad that it did, but I'm glad that I am the person I am today.
My younger self, you like girls, you don't like sex. Don't try to conform to whatever you think is the most popular just to make people like you, because people will like you being genuine and actually knowing what the fuck you're talking about, and trying to make up things about popular things that you've never heard of before is like really dumb and doesn't work. And focus on positivity, especially like in your humor. Don't make mean jokes about people because you think it's funny, or like be mean to people because you think you have to in order to be liked, because the people who are popular are mean to you, because that's just not how it works.
And again, my name is Steven.
I'm Scarlet.
And that concludes our interview.